Shalom, brothers and sisters. Welcome back to the channel. Today is the 6th day of Tabernacles according to the restored Hebrew calendar, and the Gregorian date is October the 6th. And one of the reasons why I'm recording this message today, because this particular date is a date that many people in religion, many people in Christianity and churchianity have selected as a date they believe that they are going to be raptured, the 6th or the 7th or even the 8th of October. And so I'm recording this message on this particular date. By the time you see it, by the time it goes live, it will be probably around the 10th of October. So all those dates would have passed. Of course, there will have been no rapture. Things will be as they were. And again, yet another deception has come and gone. Yet another date has come and gone. And people are still not saved. And so there's a thing that's been on my heart during the course of this feast season as I've been reflecting on various things. And of course, knowing that we're in the end times. And that has been the catalyst and the inspiration behind this message today. Something I believe the Ruach HaKodesh has put firmly on my heart. And that is the end time deceptions that we should be expecting to see. And so I'm starting this new series, which I'm titling The End Time Deceptions Leading to the Great Falling Away. And they will cover various topics within this particular season. So anything that will contribute to the great falling away, this series will cover those particular things. And in this first part, or this introduction, we are going to be looking at why these things have occurred. Why is there such deception going on? What is the cause of the deception? And then we'll be looking at the doctrine that is deceived. For this particular one will be about the rapture. And then we will be looking at correct doctrine to correct that deception, so to speak. And so as I say all of these things, of course, there are other teachings on the channel. There is a specific teaching about the doctrine of the rapture, which I will put on your screen now. And there are other teachings on the channel also, which cover it in more detail. Again, the links will be in the description. But for today, I want to focus on the introduction as to why these deceptions are coming, and also to note that of course it is prophesied and it is part of the signaling that we are in the last days, that we are on the final lap. These things all have to come to pass so that the scriptures will be fulfilled. So the first place I want to start in, just to give some context, is when we look at the discord, when Messiah was speaking to his disciples. We'll use Matthew's gospel for the sake of this particular lesson. In chapter 24, we see 3 separate occasions that he tells his disciples to take heed that they are not deceived. The first one we find in verse 4, where it says, "And Yahushua answered and said unto them, Take heed that no man deceive you." And verse 5 says, "For many shall come in my name, saying, I am Mashiach, and shall deceive many." So first he tells his disciples there to take heed they are not deceived. And then when we drop down to verse 11, again he says, "And many false prophets shall rise and shall deceive many." So he's given the second warning. And even amongst those verses, there are other small caveats where he talks about this type of deception. But here in verse 11, he says there are many false prophets that shall rise and deceive many. So he's given 2 warnings, so to speak. And as we continue to progress, we will see that yet again he gives another warning. When we go down to verse 23, he says, "Then if any man shall say unto you, Lo, here is Mashiach, or there, believe it not." And verse 24 says, "For there shall arise false Mashiachs and false prophets, and shall show great signs and wonders, insomuch that if it were possible, they shall deceive the very elect." Verse 25 says, "Behold, I have told you before." So he is very deliberate in specifying the multiple types of false prophets, false teachers, false deceivers in the last days. Of course, this is the context of this passage. And he has said, "I've told you this before." He is making it known to us that this is something that is important, hence why he's repeated himself on multiple occasions, and he points to that fact. And so deception in these last days is going to be very common. It is going to be very obvious in some cases and not so obvious in others. But the one thing that we have to our advantage is we already have the prophecies telling us that these things are going to happen. And so we shouldn't be caught by surprise, but we need to understand them, understand where they're coming from, why they're coming, and then obviously understand the correct doctrine so we will not be deceived by the deception, which primarily are coming from false prophets, false teachers, people who some of them themselves are just deceived. And so what they are feeding their sheep is going to be deception. And some of them, of course, are actual tares planted in who are deceiving intentionally. And either way, both amount to the same thing. It is deception. We need to be a lot wiser. So as we start this series, we're going to look at various doctrines that will lead to the great falling away and that are part of deceptions. We're going to identify them, and then we are going to understand the correct doctrine. And because these are going to be various topics, we're not going to have them as in-depth teachings with so many different scriptures. Of course, we will cover the main points, but then you will have to go away and look at it in more detail because there will be a few different ones to get to. And so the first one we're going to start with on this introduction is about this rapture, because it is something that at the moment is a hot topic. And as I say, there are teachings on the channel which go into more depth, but because on these particular dates, i.e. the date of this recording, which as I said in the beginning is the 6th of October, they have said there will be a rapture on the 6th or on the 7th or even on the 8th. I don't know which date they're claiming now, after already have had failed dates of the 23rd and 24th of September. And of course, this is not a new thing. This has been going on for years, that every so often people come around with certain dates and say this is going to take place. It never does, and it never will, because the foundation behind that doctrine, the foundation behind the pre-tribulation rapture and what they are expecting, which is generally taught in churchianity and Christianity, is not biblical according to the chronological order of events. And so because of that, people are getting these wrong ideas, and time again, people continue to fall for it. And I feel like at this time, in the days we live in now, with social media, with things being able to go viral with a few clicks of a button, with everybody having a voice, anybody that wants to be a teacher or that wants to create a video, everybody can do it for free. It doesn't cost you anything to upload a video apart from your time. So everybody has access to it. It just means that these things are going to happen more and more, and they're going to gain more traction because everybody is viewing similar content and then spreading the message. And of course, when the message is false, it spreads like wildfire. And before you know it, many people are in deception. And so, like I said, these are not new things, but I believe in this day and age, it's gained far more traction because of things like social media and the internet and the wide availability of such things all around the world. So news travels fast, so to speak. So the first thing I want us to look at is why these people continue to be deceived. What is it that is causing this deception? And I've seen so many different video clips of people who say that they had their own personal confirmation. So not only is it a false teacher or a false prophet that's leading them astray, they've said when they've taken these things to the Most High, he has given them confirmations. And these confirmations are coming in the form of things like dreams, they say, visions, they say. They say that they see number plates on a car which gives a particular number, and they interpret that number to be the date that this is going to happen. They say they've seen signs in the sky like a letter S, which stood for September, some people were saying. And then they asked for another confirmation, and they got another letter in the cloud or a number in the cloud or whatever it is. And many people are coming out saying the reason they believe that these things are going to come to pass is because they've received these confirmations. And I've even gone to the point where I've seen somebody say that all these confirmations must be coming from the Most High. They can't be coming from the devil, because the devil is not clever enough to deceive people like that. And when I read Revelation chapter 12 and verse 9, and it says that the devil has deceived the whole world, I scratch my head and think, have you not read the scriptures that the devil is a master deceiver, and he is also subtle in the way he deceives? He masquerades as an angel of light, being an angel of darkness. So he transforms himself to look like something he is not. So how could you not understand that deception is just part and parcel of his way and his life? That's what he lives for. Yet people underestimate the enemy and believe that all the confirmations must be true because the devil doesn't have that ability to lead them all astray. Many things along this type of nature, which of course is just foolishness and a pure ignorance of understanding the scriptures, because understanding is void, and they are going on their own understanding, leaning on things that of course are not in the scriptures and are not prophesied, and so therefore they will not come to pass in the way people are seeing. But all of that being said, we need to understand why it is that people are continuously being deceived by these things. And the word is very clear and tells us this in great detail when we go to the second book of Thessalonians and we read from chapter 2. Let's read from verse 3. It reads, "Let no man deceive you by any means, for that day shall not come, except there come a falling away first, and that man of sin be revealed, the son of perdition." So it's telling us that that day will not come. Do not be deceived. Let no man deceive you, for that day will not come. What is the day he's talking about? He is talking about the day of Yah. He's talking about, if you read it in context, the day when Yah's judgment will come down, and the day that Yah will rescue his people, which many people refer to being the rapture. So if you want to use that term, you go for it. But he's saying, do not be deceived. Let no man deceive you by any means, for that day, the day of Yah, the rapture, if you want to call it all that, that's fine. It will not come except two things. One, that there be a falling away first, and two, that man of sin be revealed, the son of perdition. So those two things primarily need to take place before you see that day. So that's why he says, let no man deceive you by any means, for that day shall not come except there come a falling away first, and the man of sin be revealed. So after he has said that, he then goes on to talk about this man of sin in verse 4, verse 5, verse 6, and verse 7. And I will skip those verses and drop down to verse 8, where he's still referring to this man of sin. And he says, "And then shall that wicked be revealed," talking about the man of sin, "whom the master shall consume with the spirit of his mouth, and shall destroy with the brightness of his coming." So this is the destruction of that anti-Mashiach. And it is telling us that it is the master, i.e. Messiah, the true Messiah, who will consume and destroy him with the spirit of his mouth and the brightness of his coming. So, in other words, this anti-Messiah has to come first before the Messiah, the true Messiah, can come to destroy him. Just very simple chronological order of events. Then we see in verse 9, it says, even him, speaking of this anti-Messiah, whose coming is after the working of Hasatan with all powers and signs and lying wonders. And verse 10 says, and with all deceivableness of unrighteousness in them that perish, because they received not the love of the truth, that they might be saved. So this anti-Messiah who comes working with Hasatan's powers and signs and lying wonders, and has all deceivableness, he's there to deceive, to those who of the people who have unrighteousness in them and therefore perish. And the reason why they perish and have this unrighteousness is because they did not love the truth. They received not the love of the truth, that they might be saved. So for whatever reason, these people did not receive the love of the truth. In other words, they did not love the truth. They rather cleave to these lies. And it says in verse 11, and for this cause, Yah shall send them strong delusions that they should believe a lie. Catch that very carefully. It is the Most High that is sending them strong delusions. So where these people are getting these confirmations in inverted commas, they are coming from the Most High. The Most High is sending them to them so that they can believe that lie that they've already chosen because they did not love the truth, that they might be saved. So he sends them strong delusions, and then they believe that lie, that all might be damned who believed not the truth, but had pleasure in unrighteousness. So this is the cause of the deception, that when people have itching ears, when people don't want the truth, when people love to believe in the lie, the Most High himself sends them strong delusions so they can continue in that thing that they believe in, because that's what they want to believe in. And the truth of the matter is that the truth is available for them, but they preferred the thing that tickled their ears. They preferred the thing that gave them comfort in inverted commas. But any comfort that is not the truth is false and fake comfort. It is not of the Most High. And so when he sees somebody who doesn't want to believe in the truth because they prefer a different option that is obviously not from the Most High, because the Most High only deals with truth, he then sends them strong delusions to keep them in that lie. Rather than him take them out of that lie, he says, no, you don't love the truth. So the truth is too precious for you. So I'm going to guard that truth from you. And instead, I'm going to send you delusions to keep you believing in the lie, and strong delusions at that. So that is why people are continually deceived, because they are not loving the truth. So now we need to understand that these people that are not loving the truth, that are believing the lie because they're having their ears tickled, we now need to understand that the truth is available to them, but yet they chose to believe in the lie, and it is counted to them as unrighteousness, as it says in verse 10, and with all deceivableness of unrighteousness in them that perish, because they received not the love of the truth, that they might be saved. So without the love of the truth, you cannot and will not be saved. Now when we go to Revelation chapter 22, this verifies this particular statement in verse 15, where it says, for without, i.e. outside the city, outside the gate, for without are dogs and sorcerers and whoremongers and murderers and idolaters, and whosoever loveth and maketh a lie. So if you love a lie, and if you make a lie, you will not be in the kingdom, because you will be classed as those in unrighteousness, those people that love a lie and those people that make a lie. And that is why these delusions are coming, because people do not love the truth. The truth is available, and the Most High is liberal with it, i.e., to whomsoever wills, whomsoever desires that thing, asks and ye will receive. Seek and you will find. Knock and the door will be opened unto you. That is a promise of the Most High. He says to you that you should seek him with all your heart and you will find him. But that means you have to adhere to the truth. And if you don't love the truth, you are only going to get strong delusions that are going to lead you astray. So that is the course and the core of it all as to how these deceptions come. We've seen Messiah warn time and time again. We've seen many other writings in the Old Testament and in the New Testament warning of coming deceptions and warning of false prophets and false teachers. All these things have been given as warnings. The alarm has been sounded. We've seen the watchman on the wall sounding the alarm. But yet people are still deceived, because as we have seen, it is the Most High that sends them strong delusions that they can believe in the lie, because they did not love the truth that will save them. And somebody may then ask, well, what is the truth? And again, we have to go to the word to find what is the truth, because that is going to set us up so that we can then correct the bad doctrine, correct the lies in the doctrine, and hold fast to the truth. John chapter 1 verse 14, and the word was made flesh and dwelt among us, and we beheld his glory, the glory as of the only begotten of the Father, full of grace and truth. And so the word who became flesh, our Messiah, our Mashiach, he is the truth and he is the word. He is full of grace and truth as the Son, but also as the living and written word. That is the truth. The truth is the word and what the word tells us, not what we want it to say, not what we make it out to say, but what it actually says. That is the truth. So if you actually love the word, and if you actually love what the word says, then you will have the truth. The Son will give you the truth. And as he says, that when the Son makes you free, you are free indeed, because he is the one that will make you free by the truth he gives you. So now we've got that as a bit of a background, so to speak. I want us to now look at this particular doctrine. As I've said a couple of times already, there are teachings on the channel that go into more detail. And so I'm not going to do a great bit of detail, but there are a few things I want to cover, which by Yah's grace, if you are one that has been deceived by this thing multiple times, and now you're fed up of being let down, and now you really want to explore and find out the truth, by Yah's grace, this will help you get to it. Because many people have been on this ride before of being deceived by these fake doctrines, and they just get back on the bandwagon after a few months or a few weeks and do the same thing again, and then they get let down and more disappointment and the same thing again. It's like a merry-go-round. And if you are tired of that, and if you've now decided to take a step back and stop believing in the lie and actually reevaluate what it is you thought you knew and come up with the correct understanding, then perhaps this is a time to do it. Because what I find with many of these rapture people is when the dates fell and they get disappointed and they get let down and eventually they get over it and find a new date to cast hope in, they never actually sit back and say, all right, the date failed. Am I sure it's the correct doctrine? Shall I go back and restudy this thing? They never actually do that. All they do is move on to the new date from a new false prophet and new false confirmations. They never sit down and analyze and say, this thing has been wrong so many times in the past. Maybe the doctrine's wrong. And I don't know if it's ignorance, or I don't know if it's arrogance, or I don't know if it's both. But surely after a certain period of time when you've been in deception and the deception keeps leading to disappointment, you have to reanalyze what it is you thought you know and say, maybe I've got it wrong. Let me go back to the one true source, the word, and study to show myself approved, to find out if there is more to what I'm believing. Maybe what I'm believing is wrong. Maybe there's something I'm missing. So let me go back to the word. They never go back and check the doctrine. They just assume the doctrine is correct. They just look for a new date. And so, as I say, by the Most High's grace, perhaps if he is willing, and if those genuine people who were deceived are repentant, then perhaps they will get this understanding. So I'm going to read two scriptures primarily about this rapture. Again, these have been covered in more detail in other videos, but just for the sake of this new series, let's read it in 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, verse 16 and 17, where it says, "For the Master himself shall descend from heaven with a shout, with the voice of the archangel, with the trump of Yah, and the dead in Mashiach shall rise first. Then we which are alive and remain shall be caught up together with them in the clouds to meet the Master in the air, and so we shall ever be with the Master. Wherefore, comfort one another with these words." So it's very clear that the dead in Mashiach will rise first before those which are alive are caught up in the air to meet them. The dead rise first, then those who are alive are caught up. That's the order. You have to see the dead rise first. So that is the scripture in 1 Thessalonians. Then we go to 1 Corinthians chapter 15, where we see a very similar thing in verse 51, where it says, "Behold, I show you a mystery. We shall not all sleep, but we shall all be changed in a moment, in the twinkling of an eye, at the last trump. For the trumpet shall sound, and the dead shall be raised incorruptible, and we shall be changed. For this corruptible must put on incorruption, and this mortal must put on immortality." So again, it's telling us the same thing, saying that in a moment, in the twinkling of an eye, at the last trump, when the trumpet shall sound, the dead are raised incorruptible. So the dead are raised first, just like we saw in 1 Thessalonians 4 and 16. And then it says, "And we shall be changed." So the dead are raised first, and then those who are alive shall be changed. That is the order of events. The resurrection first, the changing or catching up of those alive second. That's the order that has to be adhered in order to get correct doctrine. So now we have to find the time of this order, that the resurrection is first and then the catching up comes next. So when we look in the scriptures at a resurrection, the first time we see what will be classed as a group resurrection, a mass resurrection, is something that took place before any of the scriptures that I have just read were written. So this event took place just after the death, burial, and resurrection of Messiah. We find it in Matthew 27, and we're going to read verses 51 through to 53, where it says, "And behold, the veil of the temple was rent in twain from the top to the bottom, and the earth did quake, and the rocks rent, and the graves were opened, and many bodies of the saints which slept arose," in other words, a resurrection, and came out of the graves after his resurrection, after Messiah's resurrection, and went into the holy city and appeared unto many. So here we see a mass resurrection where the graves were open and those bodies of the saints which had died rose, came out of those graves and appeared to many in the holy city. And of course, this took place after his resurrection, he being the first of the first fruits resurrected first, and at a later point, those saints were resurrected and appeared to many. So that is the first group resurrection we see in the scriptures. But notice that when this resurrection took place for those saints, the resurrections we have looked at in 1 Thessalonians chapter 4 verse 16 and 1 Corinthians chapter 15 verse 52, when we look at those particular scriptures, they were not written at the time of this group resurrection when Messiah rose from the grave. These things came some 30, maybe 20, I don't know the exact timeline, but some many years after Messiah had left the earth. And so these are, of course, going to be events that take place after what we saw when Messiah resurrected and the saints came. In other words, these are prophecies. These are things for the future. And so these things being written almost 2,000 years ago, up until this point, we haven't seen a mass resurrection apart from what we just read in scripture, which happened before those scriptures were written. We haven't seen any group resurrection. So we know that it is a prophecy that has to be fulfilled in the future. And we have already seen on 2 occasions from 2 witnesses in 2 different scriptures that the dead in Mashiach rise first. And then those who are alive at the time are caught up to meet him in the air. So bearing all of that in mind, all we need to do is look for the group resurrection, which has to be classed as the first resurrection, because nobody could raise up into the air who is currently alive until the dead in Mashiach have raised first. So we have to find the first place in the scriptures where we see the dead in Mashiach raising first. And we find that when we're looking in a chronological order in Revelation chapter 20, where it tells us very clearly, I'll just read it from verse 4 and verse 5 for context. It says, "And I saw thrones, and they that sat upon them, and judgment was given unto them. And I saw the souls of them which were beheaded for the witness of Yahushua and for the word of Yah, which had not worshipped the beast, neither his image, neither received the mark upon their foreheads or in their hands. And they lived and reigned with Mashiach 1,000 years." So all these things that have been described, i.e. not worshipping the beast and the image, and not receiving his mark on their hand or on their forehead, all of these things that have been described tells us that these people who had died were raised to life and they lived and reigned with Mashiach for 1,000 years, meaning that this is at the time of his coming. This is not something that happens prior to his coming. It is at the time of his coming. And verse 5 of Revelation chapter 20 says, "But the rest of the dead lived not again until the 1,000 years were finished. This is the first resurrection." So this being the first resurrection tells us that if the dead in Mashiach rise first, then that has to be at the first resurrection. So it's both the same event. And if the dead rise first before those who are alive are caught up, it means those who are alive and caught up does not happen until the first resurrection, right here in Revelation chapter 24 and 5. So, of course, those people believing in the rapture are looking in the wrong place. They're looking in the wrong timeline. They're believing in the rapture to take place now, when the 2 things that were said in Thessalonians originally have not come to pass, i.e. the man of sin has not been revealed and the great falling away has not come yet. So there can't be a rapture, because he says that day will not come until these things take place. We've already now seen that during this period that they did not receive the mark of the beast or the image. They did not worship the beast or take his mark on their hand or on their forehead, and their souls were martyred because they refused the beast system. So all these things have to take place first before those who are dead in Mashiach are raised, which is at the first resurrection. And we know that the first resurrection, when they are raised, it's only after that point that the dead in Mashiach, when they have risen, that those who are alive are caught up in the air. So it is put in what many in religion and Christianity call a pre-tribulation rapture. It is putting it after the tribulation because, of course, all these events are after the tribulation when the dead are raised first in the first resurrection in Revelation 24 and 5. So this is after the tribulation, just like it says in Matthew 24 verse 29, that immediately after the tribulation of those days shall the sun be darkened, shall the moon not give her light, shall the stars fall, shall the powers from the heavens be shaken, and then you will see the sign of the Son of Man, and the angels will gather his elect from the four winds of the earth. Those things are happening immediately after the tribulation. So the first resurrection, notice the name, the first resurrection has to take place immediately after the tribulation of those days. And at the end, when all of these things have been fulfilled, as we've just read. So every time somebody keeps coming up with another date for a rapture or a pre-tribulation rapture or mid-tribulation rapture, whatever type of rapture they want to call it, understand that the rapture does not take place. The catching up of saints, I know some people are hung up on the word rapture, but what the scriptures tell us and describe is when somebody is caught up, i.e., they are harpazo, they are translated from one place to another. And it talks about the dead being raised first, and then those alive are caught up to meet them in the air. So however you want to call that, whether you want to call it the catching away or whether you want to call it the rapture, it does not take place until immediately after the tribulation of those days. It does not take place until the first resurrection, which is in Revelation 24 and 5. Not before. It's impossible for it to come before. And so now we go back to why people were deceived, because the truth was in the scriptures. The truth was made available to whomsoever will. But rather than believe the truth, they wanted to believe a lie. They wanted their ears to be itched. Many people believe in the pre-tribulation rapture because it's such an easy thing to happen if it were true. You don't have to do any work. You don't have to worry about going through any hardships. You will just get whisked away. That's not what the Most High promises believers. Messiah himself said, if they persecute me, they will persecute you too. You have to be prepared for persecution. It's not just you're going to escape. And people will say, oh, but you know, the Most High says in the scriptures, we are not appointed to his wrath. Well, understand that the tribulation is not the Most High's wrath that he pours out on his people. It's Hasatan. When he has his hour to reign through the anti-Mashiach, it is his wrath that is poured out. And the believers are going to go through his wrath, but the Most High will protect those who he wills. So these things are truth in the scriptures, but because people wanted to believe in the easy option, or because people wanted to escape the lives they currently have, they didn't love the truth, which shows you very clearly when these things take place. They didn't want to go through the hardship, and instead they wanted their itching ears satisfied, and they wanted to believe in the lie. So the Most High, as it said in 1 Thessalonians 2, sent them strong delusions that they would continue to believe in that lie and not in the truth, because they didn't love the truth. So he guarded his truth for those of us who love it, and gave us the truth, because regardless of what it says, regardless of the hardships, regardless of all the things, we know that the Most High is faithful, and we know that as long as he is on our team, we cannot lose. No matter how bad it gets, no matter how hard it gets, he will see us through. And like the scripture says, he never gives you more than you can bear. So even though it comes with hardships, I prefer to believe in the truth, as I know many of my brothers and sisters do. We hold fast to the truth because at the end of the day, holding fast to the truth is holding fast to the Most High. And holding fast to a lie is only going to get you, as it says in Revelation 22 and 15, out of the city, not inside the city. You'll be out, meaning that you will be cast away, because all of those people who do not make it into the kingdom and are out of the kingdom will have weeping and gnashing of teeth. And so it is so important to get yourself rid of these lies and these deception. Do not believe in a lie. Do not make a lie. Don't believe in something that is a lie that will get you into the lake of fire. The scripture is very clear of that in Revelation chapter 22 and 15. So now we have seen what is the truth in terms of talking about the catching up of saints. But I want to add a bit of spice to it to show you something where very often the enemy mixes truth with lies. And we have seen many times in the past and even to this present that he has used this pre-tribulation rapture, and he has sent false teachers and false prophets out there with various dates. They always fail. They leave people disappointed, and then few weeks later or a few months later the same thing happens again. It's an old trick. It happens all the time. But notice the enemy often mixes truth with lies. And so when he mixes truth with lies, we have to be wise as serpents and harmless as doves to decipher what could be the truth in those lies. Just like what he did to Eve in the Garden of Eden when he told her she would not surely die if she ate of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. That was a blatant lie, because of course she would die. The Most High had already told Adam that the day he eats of that tree he would die. So Hasatan said, you will not surely die. But then he started to mix in truth with that lie. He said, because in the day that you eat of that fruit, the Most High knows that your eyes will be open. Of course, that was true. The Most High knew that if they ate from that tree, they would then become like ones knowing good and evil. Their eyes would be open. They would know that they're naked. Those things were true. So Hasatan sprinkled some lies amongst the truth, amongst different deceptions to get these people, i.e. Adam and Eve, confused. And that's exactly what happened. And he also told Eve that she would become like small gods, that she would be like Elohim, that she would have the ability of the Most High. And what she did not realize, what Adam didn't realize at the time, is that they were like the Most High in their own respect, because he made them in his image and in his likeness, and he gave them dominion, just like the Most High has dominion, and he gave them the ability to create, just like the Most High can create. So you see, Hasatan mixed truth with lies, and he did it very cunningly to deceive Eve. And he is the same yesterday, today, and forever. He is doing the same thing to this very day. So what can or could be the truth amongst the whole thing about this pre-tribulation rapture? Is there any truth in it? Because we have already seen that the rapture, or the catching up, if you want to call it, that takes place at the end of the tribulation. Is there something that could take place at the start of the tribulation or before the tribulation to make it a pre-tribulation rapture? And this is what we're going to see now in 1 Corinthians chapter 15, and we are going to read verse 22 and verse 23, where it says, for as in Adam all die, even so in Mashiach shall all be made alive. Verse 23 says, but every man in his own order, Mashiach the first fruits, afterwards they that are Mashiach's at his coming. Now this is a very important verse for multiple reasons, because it gives us an order, like it says, but every man in his own order. And I have taught on this on another teaching before, but the way how this sentence is written, the punctuation marks are missing, because it should read Mashiach comma, the first fruits, comma, afterwards they that are Mashiach's at his coming. But it actually reads Mashiach the first fruits, afterwards they that are Mashiach's at his coming. Now, the reason why this is important is because it is given an order of how things will take place. And the context here is talking about the harvest of souls. In other words, those that belong to the Most High, when will they be harvested? And it says every man in his own order. And then it says Mashiach. So Mashiach was the first of the first. He was the first person who tasted death to be resurrected from death into a spiritual being with physical capabilities. He was the first of the first. And that's why it lists the order. It says Mashiach is first. It then should say comma. Mashiach is the first group. He is a standalone group. And I've used this before where it says Mashiach the first fruits. And I've said Mashiach is singular and first fruits with an S at the end is plural. So that in itself tells you that they are two different groups because singular cannot be plural. So it is saying that Mashiach is first. He is the first of the first fruits, the first one. Then the first fruits second. The first fruits is the next group. Now we have seen some of the first fruits already raised. What we saw very early on when we looked in Matthew 27, those that resurrected after his death, burial and resurrection and came out of the graves and went into the holy city and appeared to many. We have already seen that in the scriptures. And now that we have seen that, we know that that was the second group of the first fruits. However, they are not the only first fruits. They were the ones that were harvested just after his resurrection. There are more first fruits to come. And so let's find those first fruits. And we find them in the book of Revelation, chapter 7. Let's read from verse 1 for context. And after these things I saw 4 angels standing on the 4 corners of the earth, holding the 4 winds of the earth, that the wind should not blow on the earth, nor on the sea, nor on any tree. And I saw another angel ascending from the east, having the seal of the living Elohim, and he cried with a loud voice to the 4 angels to whom it was given to hurt the earth and the sea, saying, Hurt not the earth, neither the sea, nor the trees, till we have sealed the servants of our Elohim in their forehead. And I heard the number of them which were sealed, and they were sealed 144,000 of the tribes of the children of Yasharal. So 144,000 of the 12 tribes of the children of Yasharal were sealed at this point. And these 144,000, which are formed from the 12 tribes that are then listed, are also first fruits. So these first fruits, according to 1 Corinthians chapter 15 verse 23, where it says every man in his own order, Mashiach is the first. Then it says the first fruits. The first fruits consist of those saints that resurrected in the past that we saw in Matthew chapter 27 verse 51 to 53, and the coming of the 144,000, because the 144,000 are those that have not tasted death. So they are alive during this harvest time and they are made into immortal beings. They are the first group to receive this honor of not tasting death yet being converted unto Messiah. So when it says Messiah, then the first fruits, it is including both groups, the groups that have already resurrected and the groups that have not died because they are still alive in the earth. And when we read the rest of Revelation 7, where it lists the 12 tribes, I want you to notice something, and this is something that I got understanding of quite recently, where it says in verse 4, it says, and I heard the number of them which were sealed, and they were sealed 144,000 of the tribes of the children of Yasharal. So we know that these sealed 144,000 are all from the tribes of Yasharal. They are not outsiders. They are Yasharal by blood. They are born Yasharelites, forming those 12 tribes. But notice what the Apostle John or Yochanan said in verse 4. He said, "And I heard the number of them which were sealed." So at this point, he hasn't seen the number that was sealed. He has only heard the number. And then we see verses 5 all the way down to verse 8, where all the tribes are listed, and there are 12,000 in each tribe. And these tribes were not witnessed at this moment in time by Yochanan or the Apostle John, but he heard the number. He heard that there were 12,000 from the tribe of Yehuda, and 12,000 from the tribe of Reuben, and 12,000 from the tribe of Gad, and 12,000 from the tribe of Asher, and so on and so forth. He heard the number. And then after all of that, after he's heard all these numbers, dropping down to verse 9, he says, "And after this I beheld." So now he is seeing. Beheld means to see. When it says behold, it means watch or see or look. So now he is looking, and it says, "And lo, a great multitude, which no man could number, of all nations and kindreds and people and tongues, stood before the throne and before the Lamb, clothed with white robes, and had palms in their hand." And so this vision that he is now seeing matches the things that he has just heard. It's the same group of people. And they are a great multitude which no man could number. If there was 144,000 people standing in front of you, you wouldn't be able to number them because you couldn't count them all individually. So he was unable to number them. Now we know that the 12 tribes and forming the 144,000 are the children of Yasharal. But here it says, "This great multitude which no man could number, of all nations and kindreds and people and tongues, stood before the throne and before the Lamb, clothed with white robes and with palms in their hands." And so the reason why they are from all nations and all tongues and spoke different languages is because the 144,000 were scattered all across the four corners of the earth. They are Yasharelites by blood, but they have been scattered into Gentile nations, just like it was prophesied that the children of Yasharal would be scattered into many nations. So even at this time, the 144,000 are amongst the earth in different nations. And so they speak different languages. And so they are classed almost like they are Gentiles, because they are, although of Yasharal blood, but they are mixed amongst the Gentile nations and are scattered all over the earth. And this is what he saw when he saw them with white robes. And so this picture now, and you can cross-reference this with the second book of Esdras, chapter 2, I think it's verses 43 through to 49 in the Apocrypha, which gives you the exact same picture and goes into a bit more detail even. But this particular theme that we have seen shows us that these 144,000 were crowned at this point. And now, if we get the understanding of what it said in 1 Corinthians 15 verse 23, "But every man in his own order, Meshiach first," that is in order of how it is written, it's Meshiach, comma, the first fruits, comma, the first fruits including those that were raised when Mashiach raised from the dead and that went into the city and appeared to many, and the 144,000 of the 12 tribes of Yasharal who are also part of the first fruits. It is not everybody that is going to receive this honor at this particular time, because it is only for the first fruits. And we get confirmation of that in Revelation chapter 14, and we'll read a couple of verses starting in verse 1. "And I looked, and lo, a lamb stood on Mount Zion, with him 144,000, having his father's name and his name written in their foreheads. In other words, the Father's name and the Son's name written in their foreheads. Now remember that the 144,000 in Revelation chapter 7 and verse 3 were sealed in their heads. What were they sealed with? They were sealed with the name of the Father and in the name of the Son, because that's what they are sealed with here. They have the Father's name and the Son's name written in their foreheads. So they are sealed by that. And then when we drop down to verse 4, it tells us, it says that these are they which were not defiled with women, for they are virgins. These are they which follow the Lamb whithersoever he goeth. These were redeemed from amongst men, being the first fruits unto Yah and to the Lamb. So these 144,000 are the first fruits, and therefore complete the group in 1 Corinthians chapter 15:23, where it says, every man in his own order. Mashiach, number 1, the first fruits, number 2, including the 144,000. So they are now harvested, and that is where the doctrine of the pre-tribulation rapture has mixed truth with lies, because the lies is that they have made it to be like it is for everybody, that it is for the church, that it is for the Christians, that it is for the believers. But the scripture tells you otherwise. The scripture tells you that it is the second group that are harvested in completion at that point, which is the 144,000 only. It is not for every other person. And so if you want to call it a pre-tribulation rapture, you can, because the 144,000 at that point are sealed and now can no longer taste death. But that is not for everybody else, because everybody else's turn comes in the third group in 1 Corinthians 15 verse 23, where it says every man in his own order. Mashiach, number 1, the first fruits, number 2, afterwards they that are Mashiachs at his coming. So the third group, which is the rest of the people that are believers in Mashiach, that belong to him, or those who died during the tribulation period, when the tribulation is over, when immediately after the tribulation of those days, when the signs in the heavens are shown through the stars and the moon and the sun, and when the sound of the trumpet blasts, and Mashiach sends his angel to gather from the four winds of the earth, the rest of those who are scattered or who had died, they will then raise the dead, and the dead will raise first, and those who are alive will be caught up in the air. And that happens when Messiah comes back. That's why it says at Messiah's coming, those who are Messiahs at his coming, 1 Corinthians 15 and 23. And then that will be what people are calling the pre-tribulation rapture. That will be when it takes place. And of course it will be after the tribulation. But the ones who are raptured, inverted commas, or gathered first are the second group, which is the first fruits, which is the 144,000. So unless you are one of the 144,000, you will not be receiving any type of gathering before that period. And when I say gathering, I'm talking about the gathering unto immortality, which is what the rapture doctrine teaches. The corruptible must put on incorruption, and the mortal must put on immortality, 1 Corinthians 15 and 52. That is only for the 144,000 at that point. So after the 144,000 are sealed, after the 144,000 are crowned to go out and do ministry throughout the world and to preach the gospel, preach the Basura, and to do miracles and to help those through the tribulation, the 144,000 are sealed so they can do that task. And it is at the end of the tribulation, when Messiah comes back to set up his millennial kingdom on earth, to get rid of the anti-Mashiach and the false prophet, it is at that point he will raise the dead, those that died in him, and those of us who are alive at that time will be caught up to meet him in the air. That comes after the tribulation. What comes before the tribulation or at the start of the tribulation is the sealing and the crowning of the 144,000, as we have seen in the scriptures. So that now is putting all of those doctrines in the proper order, and it is addressing the lies of the pre-tribulation rapture, where the devil has tried to sell it to you like it is for everyone, to make people have a false comfort. But no, it is for the 144,000. And the dead do not need to rise first when the 144,000 are crowned, because it's only the 144,000 it involves who are already alive. So there is no need for the dead to rise at that time. The dead rise after the tribulation, according to what we have studied. So now we have, by Yah's grace, the correct understanding. It means you should be able to stop looking for something that does not concern you, unless you are one of the 144,000, because that event that takes place is only going to be for them. It is not going to be for everybody else. Now, during the course of the tribulation, the Most High can, of course, protect those who he chooses to protect. And, of course, there is also the second Exodus, which will take place, which is for those of Yasharelite descendants and those that cleave onto Yasharel, that will be taken into the wilderness for education and for protection from the times of the Great Tribulation. Those things are all to take place. So there is a safety haven for those people who are from Yasharel, true Yasharelites, and those who have truly been grafted in. But that is not for everybody, because many people have not either been grafted in or are not Yasharelite born. So it will not include them. But the order of things is very clear when you put line upon line, precept upon precept, here a little, there a little. And it debunks all the lies and the letdowns of these false doctrines that never come to pass, because they are from Hasatan and he's used it to deceive many people. And that is why this lesson is titled what it is, because it will produce the great falling away. And that is the scripture we are going to end on for this part one of this lesson with this particular doctrine. And we find that in Jeremiah chapter 16. I will read from verse 19, where it says, O Yah, my strength and my fortress and my refuge in the day of affliction. The Gentiles, notice who's coming, the Gentiles shall come unto thee from the ends of the earth and shall say, Surely our fathers have inherited lies, vanity, and things wherein there is no profit. Shall a man make gods unto himself, and they are no gods? Therefore, behold, I will this once cause them to know. I will cause them to know mine hand and my might, and that they shall know that my name is Yahweh. And so this is now where the Gentiles will start to realize during these times of the great falling away that surely they have inherited lies from their fathers. In other words, the doctrines that they have believed in churchianity and Christianity, all these things, not only the rapture doctrine, by the way, but other things we will get to if Yah wills as time goes on. But many things they have inherited from these religious systems, from these church systems, have been false. They have been fake, and they have inherited lies. And it will call many of them that believed in these fake promises to fall away from any type of truth they once had or ever had the ability to perceive. And that is part of the great falling away, because many of these people have assumed that most of the promises we are seeing in the scriptures that the Most High promised his people that they will inherit, these people have used replacement theology to believe that those promises were for them, and to twist the things like we've just studied, the pre-tribulation rapture, believing that that was going to come to pass. And in these times, they will start to realize that they have inherited lies, and that will produce the great falling away, which is why the message is titled what it is. So that is the end of this particular lesson. I hope the pre-tribulation rapture doctrine has been cleared up and you understand what is the truth mixed amongst the lie, that it is the 144,000 that will be raptured in inverted commas first, and the rest of the faithful who belong to the Most High, whether they be alive or whether they die, will receive their crowning at the end, after the tribulation. 144 first, the rest after the tribulation. It is very, very simple when you look at it logically and chronologically. It all fits together. And if you want to keep believing in the lie, the Most High will continue to send you strong delusions because you did not love the truth. So I would suggest you get in your prayer closet, you seek out the Most High, you ask him to give you the truth, and be prepared to accept it. It's that old saying, be careful for what you wish for, because you might just get it. If you want the truth and you are sincere in that, the Most High will give it to you, but then you have to accept it. And it is not this fake comfort that the devil gives you, which will never come to pass. It always leaves you empty and frustrated until the next one comes, and then the same thing happens. It's part of his trick to keep people in subjection. And as I say, it is what will lead to the great falling away, because people will start to realize, primarily the Gentiles, as it says in the scripture we just read in Jeremiah 16:19 through to 21, that the Gentiles will say, surely their fathers have inherited lies. That's exactly what it is. Come out of deception, so you will not be amongst those listed in Revelation chapter 22 and 15, those that loveth and maketh a lie. We've come to the end of the lesson. I pray that this has brought you clarity and understanding of the correct order of events. And to those of you who have been in deception about this particular doctrine, take it all to the Most High in sincerity and in truth, and being genuine about your faith. If you really are that and you really do love the truth, I'm sure the Most High, who is not a respecter of person, will confirm it to you and will stop sending you delusions that you can continue in the falseness just to deceive and keep you in deception. We will look at another doctrine on the next lesson, another doctrine that will again contribute to leading people astray in the great falling away, because these are the times we're in. But until then, I will leave it here. To all those that belong to the Most High, may he bless you and keep you.